and what do we actually do?
So that's, yeah, because I mean, we should have our code say what we want it to say.
It would be ideal, exactly. And then there was the draft that Katie put together.
Yes.
It was Katie in partnership with PD, like kind of working for everything.
Cool.
This was what they're suggesting. The one thing that I noticed, I did a quick review of it. I just put a comment.
Yeah.
The mics are really high.
I know, I can hear like our echoes.
I know, makes me. That we have a, because historically. we have
And then I have to recuse.
That you could do parking lot sales twice a year.
Okay.
And the like legal basis for that was
Where is
in
it?
the eighties, was a motion made by Ron Graves, who passed away. And he said they can do a parking lot sale twice a year.
Okay.
And so that was how we.
Rational basis?
Yeah, that was how we would permit parking lot sales in the city. And what those are is like, they're the biggest one every year, is twice a year O'Neill's, which is, you know, they make wetsuits and surf stuff. And they do like, they have,
Good, how are you?
yeah, they're based in Santa Cruz, and so
Yeah.
they do twice a
Sure,
year.
any of you guys got a volunteer at
They
the,
park the
sip
whole
and
parking
roll?
lot.
No.
Then, you know,
I want you to get a hold of, you want, because I don't want to drink wine in the daytime.
That was.
That's why I
that was
don't.
one
I like to
thing.
drink it at night, but I wanted to see if I could come down and help. You know anybody contact?
I heard the wine's not even that good.
Temporary public events, So that
He's doing it.
is in there now.
What do you need for volunteers?
But still, there's
I've
like-
done it once before, but that was through my wife's real estate office when they were handing out the
That's
tickets
great.
with
Which
the
is
wristbands
interesting
on.
because it's like.
Oh, checking IDs and stuff? Do they need people?
I don't know.
But we've always said.
Thought if they did, I'd see if they-
Yeah, I can find out.
But it's probably not as much as like the Art and Wine
So
Festival. they have-
No way.
Where they put all the wristbands on, they give all the tickets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost more fun to like go volunteer.
Yeah.
And pour. I'd rather pour, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are these hot?
Street closure or
We used to-
presence.
A lot of places I see they have a red
So
light.
much
Public
traffic
sidewalk,
that it would-
yeah, right, parking up.
And then
Yeah,
should implement the
that's
red light,
usually what I
a little
like.
light that's just
Set
on.
rules about, okay, if your event is gonna require street closures.
You got the memo. I did. You got your stripe number?
And so.
Joe, you got stripes. Joe's got stripes.
Demarcation used to just
Hey.
be public property,
Sorry, Margo.
special event, private
Nothing
property.
personal.
With the boss of it all. So
As the moms died, they.
I have a message that's super stuck.
Like they had like, what's the biggest circus around, is it Ringling Brothers?
Yeah.
One of those.
Okay.
I know, but they came in and they.
Huge.
And I'm just like,
Yeah,
it's like now,
It's
like.
not just
I know.
That's just
weird.
It's like 100,000 square.
Just keeps getting creepier.
I know.
Yay.
And we were like, okay, we
Very
need
cute.
to have some structure around
Yeah,
something that big of a
interesting.
scale, and so we want to make sure we have like building signing off, fire signing off.
They're not? Okay.
Something like that, for sure.
So anyway, so that's kind of the overall, so we have this, so I just included it. To the zoning stuff,
Yeah.
regulates more private property and how these two things are related. But yeah, so you now have the spreadsheet, and then there's a handy dandy cheat sheet, Katie made,
Yeah.
and then there's the actual code language.
And the policy?
Oh, the policy will probably go away. with the
Yeah,
code
but
update.
I think I have the.
Yeah, there's an
I have all
SE,
the-
there's an
Did anyone wanna
SEP
do the
policy.
chili?
And that's actually what we follow, because that's where I
I
came here, and I'm like,
mostly
this
don't
process is
eat meat,
ridiculous.
so I felt like it probably wouldn't be an appropriate place
Really?
for me.
And I was like, "Oh, that too, we should do it."
I said if they need it. I like one of those, like.
Well, I know.
If they need me, I will eat it. I said yes. Like, yes.
Oh, look.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Um,
Thank you. Oh, on.
yeah, so she-
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Why would we not? I mean, that's amazing.
They're already on. I know, I know.
Everyone asked about that, right? Yeah.
I was like, oh my god. So I like emailed everybody and they're like. Like fundraising, like to offset the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was huge, Kristen.
You made it happen. I just continued the momentum.
Oh, you know what? I forgot my bubbly water.
I brought this because I usually have a plain one, but you always bring Victoria and I was like,
That's what we're trying to do.
and then, yeah.
They used to have like pitchers of water
They
for
had it
us.
last week.
Oh, did they?
Yes.
Julia. Like one thing.
Okay, that was last month.
Julia, is there water?
Okay.
Okay. I left it in the car. And I'm like,
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
amazing shoes. Chloe.
I know, you're always like coordinated.
And heels, like,
I was just wondering,
5 or 6.
is he not still in Japan, right?
no. He made the last meeting because he flew in that morning.
Oh my
There's a
gosh.
lot of traffic.
And then, because remember he was on the phone on the closed session.
That's right.
Yeah, and then he left.
I have to show you something that I learned on Canva, that you can make these
She'll
backwards.
share her screen and we can see it. Cool. I've never used Canva. but I
And
heard
then like,
it's-
you see how it just looks different, and then you can like drag and drop your stuff, like, you can make your folders whatever you want.
Oh, on the background of your computer?
And then.
That's my
Oh,
favorite.
do you have to download like a plugin or something?
Share her screen and we'll see it.
That's
So
cool.
you could go to the free
That is cool.
Canva,
Yeah.
and then do desktop.
So for
And
now,
you
I'll
could
make
pick
it.
and then type in whatever photos, and then you do it as your background, and then you can just drag and drop these little guys. Like,
That is so cool. You're gonna have to give me like a Canva tutorial. I use it for 2 things and haven't been able to figure out how to use it for
I'm
anything.
like, now, well, I started following someone.
What's that?
I started following someone who does it.
Oh, really?
No,
Yeah.
Canva.
No, I'm not Canvas savvy, but my daughter is.
Oh, your daughter, yes, of course.
Always, Riley, do this. Here.
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. 'cause I am such
Oh, for sure. That specific.
I love these calendars. They always have the best. Oh,
They're so pretty.
There we are.
post or pre-storm.
You almost, somebody like tagged Capitola, and it was like, me back in the day in front of Capitola, and I was like, and then I was like, oh, that was like the Edgewater,
Oh.
like, it's completely different, but I was like, a minute. That's not Capitola. What's your picture?
Neil's the promoter for the concert.
Oh, good.
You know.
I remember, you met Neil, he was the one that.
Hey,
Okay.
Are we expecting Alexander? We don't know?
do we want me to text him?
Yeah.
Traffic was horrible.
I'm
like, all the way up past the Shadowbrook coming down the hill.
Oh, is it? Oh, I guess it is about that time, huh?
He
Kind of
comes,
rush
he
hour.
comes the same way I do.
You know, the thing, I didn't have this on my phone. I didn't have a calendar invite for this.
Really?
Yeah. So I wonder.
Oh,
if
it's
you
not
don't-
on my calendar either.
Yeah. You didn't have one either? Did you have a calendar? in? Yeah, I just luckily.
I think it's because.
I have a placeholder. Oh, wait, I put that there. Never mind. I have the Zoom though. I mean, not that I need it.
I think that's the thing is I don't join the Zoom invite.
Oh, maybe
and
that's
you-
why.
Typically, that's when it will come up on.
Because it comes like,
Calendar.
so he might not even know.
You text him.
I did hear, I heard that.
Like,
Do you know about Alexander?
We're waiting, we're trying to figure out what's up with Alexander.
I was just saying that like I'm weird about the calendar invites and it wasn't on my calendar, this meeting. And so, and like Martha didn't have it and I'm just wondering if it's like,
Somebody texted.
I just did. Let me just call him.
Was the? You think Alexander has a calendar invite?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
There he is.
I'll stop calling you.
Okay.
Just in the nick of time. It's just now 6 o'clock. You're right on time.
Perfectly on time.
Stalking you.
Seems to be a lot of that in the city lately. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Chloe.
To the rescue.
Got it.
No, well, we would not ask that of you.
Oh, you're not worried about school?
Packed house tonight, guys.
I mean, he does it already. I don't know how he can take that.
Oh, I've got I'm good, thank you. My home water, thank you. Should I put it in a cup though? I feel like it looks less weird if it's in a cup. How was your trip down?
It was really good. Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't here last time. I know it's old
Yeah, I
news now,
know.
but
Yeah.
it feels like that was literally like 4 days ago. Yeah, it does that we were just here.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
Okay. We'll stop talking about you.
Or you could just elevate this thing.
Okay. Julie, are we good on your side? I feel very loud today.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay.
The mics feel loud.
I won't do my normal like lean in. Okay, well, good evening. Welcome to the February 9th City Council meeting, Capitol City Council meeting. May we please have a roll call? Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Peterson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown,
Here.
and Mayor Greiser.
Here. And if you'd all join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, any additions or deletions on the agenda?
Staff has no changes.
And any additional materials?
Staff received communication from the members of the public regarding the housing element item on this agenda. It was received after the deadline for distribution, so it'll be included in the packet tomorrow.
Thank you. All right. We can move on to oral communications. This allows time for members of the public to address the city council on any consent items on tonight's agenda or any topic that is not on the agenda. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Don't see anybody in public. Okay, great. Thank you. So we can go to staff comments.
I think our Recreation Division Manager, Nikki Bryant, has a short update for everyone.
Great.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Last council meeting, we discussed the next beach cleanup. And so I wanted to let everybody know that we have identified February 19th as the next beach cleanup. Jerry Jensen as well, along with BIA representatives are helping to champion this cleanup. And it will be at 9 a.m. on that Sunday following the benefit concert. This cleanup will focus on trash, and we will not be doing any debris removal from the beach, as it is assisting nature in the replenishment of the sand. So if you are available, we encourage you to come out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for organizing that. Anything else from staff? Okay. Any council comments?
Just one little announcement about receiving an email about Mid-County Senior Center having their Mardi Gras fundraiser on February 25th. Tickets are available at Eventbrite and at the center. There'll be dinner provided or cooked by our former mayor and chef, Michael Termini. The Little Big Band will be playing swing dance music. Sounds like a good time. they do a lot for us in the community, so it'd be nice to help them out with their fundraiser. They were closed for 2 years during the pandemic, so it'd be nice if we could help out.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can go on to the consent. All items listed as consent items will be enacted in one motion in the form listed below. Oh, public,
We don't need to.
no. Okay. Do we have a motion on the table for the consent?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Great. That's a motion and a second for the consent. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Brooks,
Aye.
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brown,
Aye.
and Mayor Geiser.
Aye, passes unanimously. Thank you. So that can take us on to general government. We have item 7A. This is the Prospect Walking Path Repair and Continued Maintenance. The recommendation tonight is to provide the direction to staff on the repair, continued maintenance, and future use of the Prospect Walking Path. We have Jessica.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Some storm damage to the pathway has necessitated this item in front of you this evening. A little background, the pathway on Prospect is behind the homes, adjacent to the RTC rail right-of-way. It consists of a 1/4-mile path and 3 stairways from 49th to Worth Road, and it's about 3 to 5 feet wide at its most narrow parts, and that's closest to Worth Road. There are 3 staircases. One is a woodblock stairway, one is a metal stairway, and another is a more substantial stairway there on the right that goes all the way down to Wharf Road. That stairway was rebuilt by the city in 2006, including that railing there to keep people off of the railway. The other 2 stairways, though they have been maintained, have not been substantially reconstructed since the city has taken ownership of them. A little more background on the walking path. The city went into an agreement within the Union Pacific Railroad in 2004 to maintain, reconstruct the stairways and the connecting walking path. In 2006, the city reconstructed that stairway on Wharf Road for about $30,000, which included some community donations. And then in 2012, the RTC acquired the railway. So now the agreement the city has is between the RTC and the city. So during these past winter storms, there's been some significant slip outs on the walkway. There's 2 minor ones right there across from Opal Street. And then the largest one being about 1,300 square feet, but behind 1,400 and 1410 Prospect Avenue. The red hatchings on this figure here also included in your agenda packet are encroachments. So that's between the parcel line and the walkway where people have had yards and private improvements into the public RTC right of way. Here's a close-up image of that larger 1,300 square foot slip out. City and staff has been in contact with the RTC. The RTC is the owner of this hillside, has indicated that they would stabilize the slope, but they would not repair it. So without a repair by the city, there would be no usable pathway on this area of the trail. So that brings us to our options before you tonight. The first one is to more or less abandon the pathway, to approach the RTC to get out of the agreement, which would require us per the agreement to remove the staircases and to restore the property to its original condition, which is more or less the condition it is right now, less that more significant stairway. RTC would again stabilize the slope failures, but there would be no traversable pathway behind Prospect. The other 2 options are to repair the pathway either in place or further back into those private encroachments. So to repair to the failed slope to pre-storm conditions, we would apply for FEMA funding, which we have for many projects around the city. So this would be included as one of those projects. And then once we went through the federal design and bidding requirements, which is a lengthy process, as opposed to when we repair something with our own city funds, then we could repair the walking path in place. Another potential option is to apply for hazard mitigation funds, which is also a lengthy process with FEMA. Then it allows us to construct something better than what we had before. That would also require us to work with the RTC, who has indicated that they are willing to work with the city in removing some of those encroachments. So the walkway is further back in a more stable place, and presumably there will be less slip outs in the future. Both of those also require a right of entry with the RTC, which is something that is standard, but also is a part of the process. FEMA requires all of our public assistance funding for all of our projects. So the wharf and other damages we've had to be put in priority order. I would say that this would be, considering we have the wharf and some other more significant damages around the city, this would be a lower priority project for city staff. And then here's that image again, a little closer up with the slope failure on the oval there and the private encroachments, which range to about 8 to 12 feet into the RTC right of way. So staff is seeking direction on the repair and continued maintenance of this pathway, and I am able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any council questions?
I have one. Can you tell me a little bit about, and if there's like anything pressing, if we were to go with option 3 and work with the RTC and await FEMA funding, is there anything pressing in terms of safety or impact on the residents in that area or anything like that?
It doesn't threaten the homes that it's behind currently, and it's not anticipated that it would, except maybe the encroachment, which we'd be trying to remove. It wouldn't be passable, so it would remain blocked off as it is now.
And since you mentioned that this is a lower priority, should we get the FEMA funding for it? Is there a chance that we wouldn't get enough? And if so, what's the plan after that? What would be some of the other, would we just go back to option 2 or option 1 at that time?
So chances are that we would get enough funding. It would just be a lengthy process. I will say for the option 2 that the limit of FEMA funding is 18 months from the emergency. So by low priority, I do mean after other projects we did, but it would be within 18 months per the FEMA guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question just about how much it is going to cost, and if we don't do anything now, do we need to worry about closing it since it's a hazard, or are we going to leave it as it is?
It is blocked off right now. And the repair for both to remove the encroachment or to not would be approximately $50,000. That's including the fact that it has to be a federally bid project. And it's the reimbursement by FEMA. I think the city ends up paying about 12% of that.
I have a question. Is this path or the stairs required to be ADA accessible?
So it is required to be ADA accessible for a rural footpath, which really just requires it to be a certain width. At the narrowest point, it can be 3 feet, which it is. It's mostly 5 feet down the path. It also requires it to be like a stable surface, which besides the part that's obviously damaged, it is.
Questions? So the photo actually right there, with the tarping and everything, is this the RTC's version of stabilization or?
No.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And so, yeah, I wonder too, do you feel like if we close off the pathway, having that significant staircase that we've had for a while, is that going to sort of, I don't know, just sort of, people are going to want to use that, but would we close it off at the bottom of the stairs or?
We'd be required to remove it.
Oh, remove the one by the trestle. Yes, gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have any public comment? Great. Okay, any council comment, deliberation?
I have some thoughts.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I have a couple thoughts on this. I like option 3 about moving it back in the long term because I feel like that's going to be the safer way to do it. My concern about moving forward with that option right now is, can you go back to the picture that shows the encroachments? Those encroachments are actually backyards. Those are people's backyards right now. So you can kind of see there's a pool or a hot tub or something there. And I think that's going to be a lot more difficult process to get into that space to build a path right there than just asking the RTC for help because it's technically RTC property. So technically that's encroaching into RTC property. However, because of the whole rail trail process that they're going through, I have a feeling that eventually RTC is going to get that encroachment anyways, or get that space back anyways. And so my thought is we had the resiliency fund that we put together during COVID. And even if it would be a low priority, you know, within 18-month project, that we could take the $50,000 from the resiliency fund, which would then be reimbursed from FEMA funding, rebuild the path where it is now. And then should, you know, the RTC later come through to build their path along this rail trail situation on their property, you know, potentially see if they want to, you know, move our path that would be on the property we now have rights onto essentially their path, and make it further away from the cliff that has just failed. So that's my thoughts about it right now, just for the sake of conversation.
So at that point, if they did come back to take back the encroachments, you think maybe the trail would just be widened and we would just keep it how?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if
Okay.
the trail would be, I mean, it's technically their property,
Right.
but I mean, it's possible the trail would be widened or moved up. Yeah, it seems a little bit like a hard battle for us to fight to get these into this space, when the RTC might be doing it themselves.
Right.
But again, just for the sake of conversation.
And it sounds like option 3 is going to get us the best trail and cost the city the less. Is that correct?
Overall cost for option 2 and 3 would be about the same. It's just the process of the encroachments, which isn't a direct cost to the city, but would be staff time to work with the RTC to address it.
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So should we, the city, repair the walking path that's in place, apply for FEMA funding to reimburse ourselves for that, and await for the RTC to relocate the walking path when they eventually get to the encroachment process for those properties? Do you have any sense of a timeline for that? Like how long do you have any idea of? That's usually a very long process.
Right.
So we could be waiting years for that process, is my assumption. So if we do that and we await for the relocation or for the RTC to deal with that piece of it, what are we missing? So our path would just be minimal. It would just be the small little one that we have. Are we still, to Councilmember Peterson's point, like, are we still ADA compliant? We're just kind of going back to status quo. Is that safe to assume?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the one thing that we would be potentially open to is that it could slide again next year. Because with the path where it is right now, it's just very susceptible to be slip out. If it could move back, it'd be more resilient, but it would be just basically taking us back to the situation that we had before the storm.
Okay. And the funds that Councilmember Brown, Vice Mayor Brown suggested, those aren't restricted dollars, and we can easily replenish that once we get the FEMA money. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's general fund. Okay. I think I've got what I need. Yeah.
I have a question. Is there any way to make the path more permanent or more secure against heavy rains without dealing with the moving into the encroachments? Like, is there a way that we could just spend a little bit more money and make it more permanent where it is?
A little bit more, no. You can always build a retaining wall, and that would have to be with the RTC's permission.
Right.
But that would be the only way without moving it back into the encroachment to make it more stable.
Well, maybe abundantly obvious, I'll just say that that's probably an order of magnitude. If not
Oh,
more,
yes.
cost.
Yes.
So if we're talking about a $50,000 project, we're probably talking about a
250.
250
Mhm.
retaining wall.
Yeah.
I was going to go 500.
Okay, I guess it brings me to another question as well. So if, regardless of, say, we're choosing either between 2 and 3, they're also both similar timelines, or
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of your
No,
question.
that's okay. I was not speaking very eloquently. Between option 2 and 3,
Mhm.
they're around the same cost and around the same time frame, or?
It would be around the same cost. The time frame to deal with the encroachments would presumably be more. I will say that the RTC is going out on encroachments on their property right now in regards to the rail trail. So I do know they have a team dealing with those items specifically, but that is also specifically for the rail trail.
Okay, thank you.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Sure.
So I'd like to make a motion that the city move forward using our resilience dollars to repair the walking path that's in place and to apply for the FEMA reimbursement dollars as noted in your presentation this evening. And as we await for the RTC to determine the relocation outcomes for the inland walking path in their own timeline.
I'll second.
Great, we have a second.
Councilmember,
Aye.
Councilmember Clark,
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Aye.
Vice Mayor.
Aye, thank you. Passes unanimously. Okay. Up next, we have item 7B, which I'm actually going to recuse myself from as my employer, Paradise Beach Grill. We may be eligible for funds or may be open during this time, which would result in a conflict of interest. So I will turn it over to Vice Mayor Brown.
All right.
That's what Chloe just said.
Give the mayor a second. All right, we're moving on to item 7B, which is a storm update and general special event permit for a Capitola Village benefit concert. Our recommended action is to receive the update regarding the 2022-2023 winter storm event and approve a general special event permit for a Capitola Village benefit concert, including an encroachment permit and amplified sound permit. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Getting the hang of using this portable mic. All right, so I'm going to kick this one off and then Chief Galley will take it over. Let's get to the first slide, please. I think you guys are all aware that in early January of this year, we ultimately declared it a disaster based on the storm damage that we sustained on January 5th. Since that time, we have expanded on our list of dignitary visits. Yesterday, we received a visit from the Lieutenant Governor, who came and toured the village and met some of our local businesses. We had the beach cleanup that was done on the 22nd. And then we've opened the small business recovery here at City Hall. It's been serving our businesses both from Capitola as well as regionally, helping them get the services and the recovery dollars that they're entitled to. And then we've also partnered with the Community Foundation, who's helped develop a fundraising effort to help support those affected by the storms. Next slide, please. So just some quick updates from different departments. Our public works staff with the wharf engineers and also partnered with the harbor staff took a boat out to the wharf to tour the site. The damage was pretty much as expected. The good news is that the buildings were not significantly damaged. They're obviously getting pretty long in the tooth, but they weren't significantly damaged in the storm event. So there wasn't any major surprises in the site visit. Public Works staff has completed emergency repairs to the Riverview Path. Path is now traversable, and it was $46,000 for the temporary repair. And that'll be part of the FEMA reimbursement submittal that we have. We've also been working with the property owners who actually own the path along the Riverview corridor and have helped secure donated decomposed granite to replenish the decomposed granite for the path. And then obviously, as you just heard this evening, the staff is working frantically on all the other storm damage and developing the plans and the process by which we will be repairing each one. Next slide, please. So from the Community Development Department, Pizza My Heart opened up on the 4th. Margaritaville opened, I think it was last week, maybe this weekend. Paradise, I understand, is going to be opening within the week. And then Zelda's went to the Planning Commission to get some feedback about replacement window options for their back windows that face the ocean, mostly because the building is actually, interestingly, I didn't know this before this, but it's listed as historic. So there was some concern about whether they could just replace like for like or do something. I think they were looking to maybe upgrade the situation a little bit. Next slide, please. From the financial side, we've submitted our initial estimate of public damage, which is the 2.625 figure, $2,625,000. We've actually gotten updated numbers for the wharf. And interestingly, our first figure, which was $1 million, looks like it was remarkably close. I think the engineer's estimate for the wharf damage is 960 or 950, somewhere in that range. So looks like we're pretty close on that figure. And then there's a big FEMA coordination meeting that's taking place next week on the 15th, where we're going to be getting more feedback and information. We've also submitted our claim, initial insurance claim to our adjusters with $2.5 million in damages. We also will be submitting for what's called business interruption insurance, which is when the city has lost revenue due to covered events. That would be things like the parking meters in the downtown, in the village, and the rent that we receive off the wharf. And the adjusters at this point are working on it, and we'll be hearing back from them. So just a real quick explanation. Essentially, the way this works is the insurance will be in first position. So we will do our best to get an insurance refund rebate, and then what insurance doesn't cover will be part of our FEMA claim. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, Mickey Bryant mentioned the next beach cleanup on February 19th at 9 a.m. that Jerry Jensen is coordinating along with help from the BIA. We are also planning on an update for council about the wharf. I know everyone has so many questions about what's going to happen, and you've heard me talk about the goal of trying to have it open a year from the damages, which would be 11 months from now, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what the different options look like next meeting. And then there's a potential benefit concert that we are in front of you this evening to seek approval of the special event permit, and Chief Dowley will cover that.
Great. Good evening, everyone. And so as we kind of follow through the next steps, actually shortly after that first cleanup, there was just a lot of talk about what's the next thing that we could do. And there was this like mention around the community of doing some sort of benefit concert. And so it was really apparent that a lot of people in the community really wanted to step up and help with this. And so I know for a fact that Andy Hewitt from Britannia Arms had the idea of maybe doing a benefit concert. And so he reached out to a friend of his who is Eric Kelso with Sierra Nevada to bring the beer idea of a beer concert. And so what we did is we started getting together like a good leadership team, and Mary Beth with the BIA, we reached out to the BIA, the chamber, and everyone was real supportive of it. The leadership from our recreation department really stepped up. And so the idea of this benefit concert, and I'll kind of move to the next one, is Beyond the Flood benefit concert. And so Mary Beth submitted an application for a general special event. The benefit concert is modeled after the Twilight concerts, essentially down in the Esplanade. And so they applied for a new general special event permit. In order to do that, it has to come before council for approval. And that's why we're here tonight. So essentially this 1 day special event permit, if you look at the map up on the screen there, kind of orientate yourself. The beach would be down on the lower end of the screen. And then that upper parking lot is the Swenson parking lot. Similar to the Wednesday night concerts, the stage area would be where the performance occurs. But what we're doing is we're expanding the profile of the event and extending out a little bit. So if you look at in front of Britannia Arms, there'll be like a road closure there. And then we're also closing off the entrance to the palm trees there. And what we'll do, if approved, is that would be the venue area. Alcohol would not be allowed outside the venue area. Sierra Nevada, like I said, has donated all the beer and the beer truck with 100% of the proceeds going back to the people that were affected by the flooding. The anticipated attendance is between 1,000 to 2,000 people. Like I said, Mary Beth and the chamber and the BIA were supportive of the beer garden. They've done all the organizing as far as selling the tickets. So it'd be essentially kind of like the Art and Wine, where they'll do a wristband check and then they purchase the tickets. The tickets then they go to buy the beer, and then all the proceeds go to the victims of the flood. We're going to add additional hygiene stations and then trash and recycling. And then the Swenson, Barry Swenson, the lot up there, they're agreeing to allow us to use that area for the bands. So they can set up, we'll have recycling there, and then they can access the stage from that back area. So the idea is to do a benefit concert. It'd be Saturday, February 18th, which is President's Day weekend, which is not this weekend, but the next weekend. The idea is to have an event from noon to 6 p.m. And it would start with the Jive Machine, which is a local band here, and then followed by Alex Lucero. And then the final act would be the Joint Chiefs with Tony Lindsay, which is apparently a singer from Santana. And like I said, Sierra Nevada Brewery is the one that donated all the beer truck and the beer. And then all the proceeds will be returned to the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County. And with that, I'm open to any other questions. Actually, if I could back up, we're really trying to encourage, back up to this, the bike. We have a bike corral at the entrance here, right by the on the Esplanade there. So we're really encouraging people to bike down. We'll have a bike corral there, and then David Ling also offered their parking lot. So we partnered with David Ling, and then I think Harbor High is going to staff that, is doing a valet bike parking lot there as well. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm here.
All right, any questions? No questions. All right, public comment. Come on up.
Good evening, council members. I'd like to add one thing to the menu over here. Congressman Jimmy Panetta will be here for the concert between 2 and 4 p.m. that day. So I hope that helps with what we're doing. And so I'll just invite the congressman, and he said yes. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Got some dignitaries at our concert. Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Any comments?
Well, one of the comments I have is that this is probably going to be a great thing for the community. Fortunately, we have lots of practice with our Wednesday night concerts. I like the idea of the bike rack down at David Ling, to have less people riding bikes through a congested area. So that's a really good idea. Just wonder what the cost with your overtime officers. Do you have a budget that's coming from anywhere, or do you anticipate having overtime?
So we are going to staff it with a couple uniformed folks, and so that would just be a regular rate that they incur. But it's a city sponsorship.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? I'll just say, yeah, I'm really excited about the idea for this concert. Everyone loves some live music and supporting our city. And yes, thank you to Vicky at David Ling. She reached out to offer that parking lot for the bike valet. And the more we can get people out of their cars and walking into the village or biking into the village, the better. So it's all the better for this exciting concert. With that, no further comments. I think we'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
What would your motion be?
Motion would be to move to have this great concert here in Capitola.
All right. So are you moving to approve the permit and the encroachment permit and the amplified sound permit?
Yes.
All righty. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second with an amendment to your motion if you would accept that we also waive the fees associated with the permits that the city requires. Would you accept my?
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Aye.
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 Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, let's get ready to rock. And let's bring the mayor back in. Responsibly. Let's get ready to rock responsibly.
And thanks, Neil, for all your work you've been putting out there. Thank you.
It's much easier to do that on Zoom. Okay. So we will move on down to item 7C. It is our citywide housing element. Recommended action is to receive the presentation introducing the housing element update, provide feedback regarding the planned update process. And we have Katie.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm going to give you an update on the housing element. We have two panelists through Zoom. First, I'd like to introduce Veronica Tam of Veronica Tam and Associates, as well as Brett Stinson of RRM Design. Good
evening.
Welcome, Brett.
Hi.
So this evening, first, I just want to say we have our work cut out for us. As you know, with the housing element update, we've been assigned over 1,300 new units to locate in the city of Capitola. This will probably be one of the biggest lifts that I, as the community development director, has ever taken on within any community. So we've got our work cut out for us. It will be a heavy lift, but I'm glad we have a fantastic team. Veronica is the housing expert on the team, and she has a record of success with the State Housing and Community Development, HCD. So we've got a great team, and thank you for being here tonight. And Veronica, with that, I'll hand over the you can share your slideshow and begin your presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to double check everybody can see the PowerPoint presentation. Is it?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. And as Katie mentioned, this is going to be one of the most critical projects you're going to undertake in this particular year. The housing element, I just want to go through very quickly tonight. What is that? Why we're doing what we're doing, and really focus on the most critical components of the housing element, the regional housing needs allocation, and how to achieve that.
Veronica, your mic seems to go in and out, so I'm not sure if it's moving, but.
Oh, I think it's because I'm leaning forward and maybe sometimes like sitting back. So is this better right now?
That sounds much better. Thank you.
Okay. The housing element is part of your general plan. It is one of the 7 required elements of your general plan, and it has some really specific statutory requirements in terms of looking at the needs of your community, not only your current needs, but also projected housing needs into the future. It's a little different from the rest of the general plan in that it has to be updated every 8 years with a strict statutory deadline. For us in the MBAC region, it is December 31st, 2023. It's also different from the rest of the general plan in that it has to be reviewed by a state agency for compliance with state law. The agency responsible for this is the Housing Department, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. You will be hearing about HCD quite often throughout this year. When we update the housing element, very important that we do community outreach and make sure that we obtain input from the community regarding needs and also policies. We also need to have the housing element, as I mentioned before, reviewed by the state agency. The HCD review of the housing element takes place in 2 stages, one at the draft level and then at the adopted level. After you have a housing element that's adopted and also certified by the state for compliance with state law, we move on to implementation over the next 8 years. As I mentioned before, the housing element has really strict requirements for content. We need to look at the needs. We need to make sure we take community outreach seriously. And we also need to look at the constraints and opportunities you have. We also need to look at what worked in the past and what can be modified into the future. And all of that really results in a housing action plan that you will be held accountable for over the next 8 years. When we send the housing element to the state for review as required by state law, the one thing that we're trying to achieve is something called finding of substantial compliance with state law. And with that finding of substantial compliance, In the event of a lawsuit, you will be presumed to have a legally adequate housing element. And so it would be up to whoever is suing the city to prove the otherwise, to prove otherwise. You also have the ability to apply for state funds, particularly housing and transportation funds. Without a compliant housing element, you are either not eligible or you're marked down in terms of being competitive, your competitiveness in the application. The housing element, you have to accommodate your regional housing needs allocation. Just like Katie mentioned, it's almost 1,500 units. If you're unable to accommodate that from a land use perspective, then that whatever you are not able to accommodate is roll over to the next cycle. Now, the regional housing needs allocation, I'll go into that a little bit further later, but it is not a requirement to build the housing units. It's a planning goal. It's not a production obligation. It's a planning goal in relation to your capacity for accommodating the units. So the other thing that it's important when you get the housing element in compliance with state law is you avoid the rezoning limitation. If we're able to get the housing element certified by the state within 120 days of the statutory deadline, then you do have 3 years to complete your rezoning. But if you're unable to get the certification within that time frame, then you only get 1 year to do any kind of rezoning for capacity if you're required to do that. But again, we'll go into a little bit more further on that. There are also ramifications if you have to do rezoning past the statutory deadline. We'll go into that a little bit further. Without a housing element complying with state law, you're more at risk of being sued on the housing element. The housing element is the most frequently litigated element of the entire general plan. And the state law has changed that that anybody with an interest in housing can bring a lawsuit against the jurisdiction. If you are in a situation where you're being sued by a nonprofit, a developer, a private resident, or state agency, the court has the ability to suspend your authority to issue building permits. And this is not just housing building permits. This is any building permit. There is also a very archaic provision of the government code that this term is a builder's remedy. If you do not have a compliant housing element, that particular provision of government code would not means that you will not be able to deny an affordable housing project based on inconsistency with the city's general plan and zoning. This is a 30-year-old provision that hasn't been used in the last 30-something years, but are now surfacing right now. The regional housing needs allocation or regional housing needs assessment, it's a top-down process. It starts with the state, HCD, projecting how much growth in the entire state and allocating it in the 7 regions in the state. MBAG is the 3-county region of MBAG gets about 33,000 units, and each county and each jurisdiction gets an allocation. So in Capitola, our number is 1,336 units. You'll see that it's much higher than what you are accustomed to in previous cycles of the housing element. In the 5th cycle housing element, your allocation was only 143 units. The 6th cycle is 1,306. There are a few reasons why your numbers are so high. One, the 6th cycle housing element beta was conducted at the peak of the housing market, whereas the 5th cycle housing element, the RHNA projection was conducted during the implosion of the housing market. There are also new state laws that were passed in 2016, 17, and 18. Those all changed how the RHNA is calculated. And specifically, it adds on to not only a projection for future growth, but it makes also jurisdictions responsible for the lack of housing production in the previous 20 years. And that about 60% or 67% of the arena for this new six cycle comes from the fact that there hasn't been a construction in the last 6 years, last 20 years. So moving forward, that we want to talk about just, in identifying the sites for the arena, there are really critical reasons that you need to look at this. You need to be specific. We need to have sites that are available and suitable for housing. Then we need to make sure that the sites are consistent with the overall vision of the community. We do have the ability to look at different types of opportunities like redevelopment of existing properties, accessory dwelling units, and also state-owned properties, and also some other educational religious institutions properties. As I mentioned, there's been a lot of new state law in recent years, and some of that will really impact the way that you are looking for, at how to achieve the regional housing needs allocation. One important change in state law is something called no net loss, SB 166. It really requires you, in previous cycles, when you look at the sites inventory and your ability to meet the RHNA, it's a one-shot deal when you're updating the housing element. SB 166 changed all that you have to have enough capacity to be able to meet your RHNA throughout the 8-year planning period of the housing element. So when sites are developed with fewer units than we assumed in the housing element, or they're developed with fewer affordable units than expected in the housing element, you are required to make sure that you have remaining capacity for your remaining RHNA. Because of this no net loss requirement, you have to, it's a recommendation that you buffer your site's capacity, identify enough sites for at least 15 or 30% above your RHNA. Otherwise, you may be engaged in rezoning and upzoning continuously as you run into a situation where you have a net loss in capacity to the extent that you would not be able to meet your RHNA. There are also new state laws that allows you to look at sites that might not be opportunity sites in the past. One is AB 1851. This is congregational and religious institution properties. You do not have to replace, or the property can partner with a nonprofit organization and put housing on site, either on their extra parking, surface parking area, or unused area, or rebuild part of their existing properties, but they do not have to replace the parking on site up to 50% of the parking lost. The other new piece of legislation that just got passed last year is 2295 that allows housing to be provided on educational and institutional sites for their employees, such as school districts or community colleges, or maybe even hospitals. They can provide housing on site without requiring rezoning of the properties. So later on, Katie is going to go over some of the site strategies, but something that we wanted to talk about is definitely ADUs. It is a potential affordable housing or more affordable housing opportunities in communities like Capitola. We do have the ability to look at the historical trends of ADU construction in the city and then project into the future how many you can get in the future. One thing that I mentioned before is the institutional properties and providing housing on it. This is something that has become a very popular trend as a lot of churches and or religious institutions are going online, and they're not then they don't need that much physical space anymore. An example of this is Garden Grove is working with the United Methodist Church as taking the site of the parking area and building 47 affordable units for seniors and families. And in exchange, the the church actually get, a community center, offices, and also have some other nonprofit organizations to be on site. So when we look at the site inventory, when we try to find sites for your regional housing needs allocation, there is something called a default density. For a community your size, what the 20 units to the acre is considered to be zoning that is adequate to facilitate lower income housing. Now, at 20 units to the acres, it doesn't mean that your building housing at market is going to be affordable. It means that at 20 units to the acre, the density is feasible so that the amount of subsidies would be reasonable for an affordable housing project to be financially feasible, to be competitive for funding at the state or federal level. So 20 units to the acre is the quote unquote magic number we're looking for when we're looking for sites that are feasible for lower income RHNA. Within your current zoning districts, there are a couple of places where we can look at it, certainly mobile home parks, but we don't know if there are a lot of new mobile home parks going to be developed. It may not actually work. In your mixed use village and neighborhood, and also commercial community commercial zoning districts, it doesn't have a maximum density, but it doesn't, what we need to do though in identifying sites in those areas and capacity in those areas is to demonstrate what is the average density that have been achieved or achievable within those districts. So even though it may not have established a maximum density in estimating potential capacity, we're not allowed to just assume any number. We have to use historical development trends. So some of the areas that currently at 20 units to the acre would be the affordable housing overlay and the village residential overlay. Mentioned before, there are some really new changes to state law and critical deadlines that we have to deal with when it comes to be rezoning. Most likely, we will have to do some rezoning in order to meet your 1,400 or so units of RHNA. The statutory deadline of the housing element is December 31st, 2023. If we are able to do all the rezoning before this statutory deadline, then the housing element is, it doesn't have to include a rezone program to do the rezoning later on. Now, if you're able to do that, there are some advantages in order to, for the rezoning to occur before the statutory deadline. I mentioned before there's a default density. If you're able to do the rezoning, the default density is the maximum density of that zone to be 20 units to the acre. Now, if we cannot do the rezoning before the statutory deadline, the state law says, well, the minimum density of that zone is also 20 units to the acre. Because you cannot have a zone that has the minimum density the same as your maximum density. You have to push up the maximum density to beyond 20 units to the acre and give it a range, maybe at 24, 25 units to the acre. So if we are able to do this, the rezoning before the end of this year, the zone that would be considered feasible for lower income can be 0 to 20 units to the acre. If we cannot complete the rezoning before the end of the year and have to push beyond next year, or beyond to next year, then the zone that is considered to be feasible for lower income has to be 20 to 24 or 25 units to the acre. So that's the difference, and it's important. Another thing that is a requirement is if we have to do the rezoning next year, then each site you identify has to be large enough to accommodate at least 16 units. And the third thing is, if you have to do the rezone, if you have to complete the rezoning next year, then every zone that you rezoned, if they include every property that you're rezoning, if they include 20% of the units as lower income housing, then the project has to be permitted by right without discretionary review and without CEQA. So these are all the important things that we have to keep in mind about how much, to what extent you want to really try the hardest you can to get this rezoning done by the end of the year. So there are also other requirements. Because most likely we are going to rely on mixed-use properties for your arena. If rezoning happens after the statutory deadline, then, and you rely on more than 50% of your lower income arena on mixed-use properties, then the mixed-use properties have to allow for standalone residential, and for the if a mixed-use project does go into those areas, no more than 50% of the floor area can be mixed, can be non-residential. So you cannot have a large you cannot require a mixed-use project to have more than 50% of the floor area. So all of these gives you really important reasons to think about how you're going to pursue the rezoning, the timing of your rezoning, how much effort and resources you're going to allocate to staff in the next few months. Just one thing that Katie wants to remind everybody, that rezoning requires a 6 months review period for local adoption and certification by the Coastal Commission. So that adds a wrinkle to the overall timeline. So some of the potential housing sites areas, Katie is going to talk about that, but and I'm going to actually pass it over to Katie.
Thank you. So just to oversimplify the rezoning, it's very important that not only do we update our housing element this year, but that we rezone to meet our numbers. Otherwise, we're subject to a lot of other state regulations that I don't think our public would be our residents would be too happy about. So
by June,
it would have to be adopted
by December, but it needs a 6 months review period. So we need to rezone by June.
Yeah, the
Okay.
6 months was me estimating, like from the time we write the ordinance to the time it gets certified by the Coastal Commission, like best case scenario. So it's going to happen fast.
So it's really more like May.
Yeah, it's going to be soon.
Okay.
It'll be soon. We'll have it
Okay.
in front of you soon. So anyway, just quickly, potential housing opportunity sites in our general plan, when it was updated, as well as when we updated our zoning code, we've added mixed use all along our 41st Avenue corridor. Whenever we've had stakeholder meetings already, we have a survey that's on our website. What we're hearing is let's go vertical along our commercial corridor. And so what we'll be looking at is both north of Capitola Road and south of Capitola Road, and seeing under the current zoning, what can it handle in terms of mixed use at this point to go vertical, and figure out what that, for the overall zoning, what would work. Next slide, please. One item I do want to bring up is the Capitola Mall. We've got a lot of public comment on let's put it all on the mall. There's really a balance to be made there. So we are very interested in mall redevelopment. And in order to have the mall and the partners within the mall come forward, the answer is not to put all your affordable units on the mall. We can't put that burden on them. So just we will be strategic when we're looking at the mall site and assigning units. Yes, it's a great place to go vertical and have a mix of housing, but it would not be appropriate to be overly burdensome, as our mall is in desperate need of redevelopment. So next slide, please. So housing site opportunity examples, Veronica had put this together. It's a 1.5 acre site. It's where Dharma's is. It's in the community commercial zone. Right now, there's no max in terms of density. So really it would be up to how meeting the height limit and the parking. It is within the coastal zone. Veronica's team, I think Brett put this together, ran the numbers on what could fit on this site and came up with possibly up to 31 units at 30 dwelling units per acre. So just one example. Another real example that you can look at is the Capitola Beach Suites right by on 41st Avenue. It's one of the last properties in Capitola as you're going towards Pleasure Point, right over the rail. That's, I think, 28 units per acre is what you see there. And it also has commercial, so it's mixed use. Next slide, please. So public outreach, as I said, right now we currently have an online housing needs survey going on. We conducted stakeholder interviews back in November where you have to provide public outreach per state code, which we'll be following and making sure we follow the timelines that are required in state code. And then the Planning Commission, similar to our meeting tonight, had their first work session on this in February. Continuing the public outreach is this evening's meeting next week on February 16th. We're going to do a community workshop. We have flyers around town. A mass email went out inviting. I sent that to you all right before the meeting so you know what the public got. And then we'll have another community workshop in the future, and then public review of the draft housing element that has a requirement to be out to the public for I think Veronica said 30 days, and then we have 2 weeks in which a response time to respond to all comments. And then after that, adoption hearings. So next slide, please. So public outreach, as I stated, we've got our flyer around town and we've got the virtual meeting. So that's 6:30 to 7:30 next Thursday. And it's on our webpage as when you go to City of Capitola. Next slide. And then next steps is to proceed with the sites inventory analysis. We're talking about bringing that back to you probably within a month and a half. Draft housing element update, we'll publish that in probably late March, early April. Then the 30-day public review period and 15 days for the city to respond. The HCD gets 90 days so to review our draft. So we're thinking that will happen from over the summer months. And then when we get back from our summer break, we will jump into the public hearings for adoption. So, and running simultaneously with that will be the update to the zoning, the rezones. So next slide, please. And I just said that, so that's the other part of this. Next slide. So with that, thank you. Thank you, Veronica and Brett, and we're available for questions.
Thank you.
That was a lot to take.
Council questions? Yes. So Katie, help for everyone listening and watching and in the audience today, put it in perspective. So we're going to identify 1,336 potential spots to develop on by December 31st. Fingers crossed if council, if we get that far. And then we have 8 years to do what? So what happens once we identify these spots for development, and what's the role of the council? How do we ensure that these are built in the 8-year timeline? Can you offer some perspective on that?
Great question. So our obligation is really to plan for the 1,300 sites. And then it's up to the property owners whether or not to come in and develop those sites. So we've got a zone for it and make sure that we have capacity in the city. The other important part of this is it won't be just the 1,300 sites. We're going to ask that we get to a number that's a lot higher, because if a developer comes in and they don't meet the numbers that we've attached to their site. So if you have a developer that we said, we want to have 20 units on that site, and they come in and they say, well, we want to build 4. Then if we have an abundance of sites in our inventory, we can make findings that it's okay to just make 4 because we have zoned for a much higher number.
I'm gonna let them help with the sound real quick because it's echoing, and then I'm gonna just if there's some
I
weird.
was gonna suggest maybe we take a quick little
Oh,
break.
there's a
Something
lot
just
going
happened
on.
very weird on
Oh,
the Zoom, so I
okay,
think
well-
we're gonna try to see if we
I
can.
didn't even see that behind me. All
Yeah,
right,
it
even
was
better.
interesting when it happened. It looked a little bit like a
Oh,
Star Wars episode.
Yeah, it did. It totally did.
Are we still connected with?
We go back to.
We're gonna move that old like Microsoft
I know,
screensaver from like the
something's happening.
90s. Yeah.
You'll be able to hear her. She needs.
Might have been the presentation.
Yeah. How do we go back to Zoom now?
Look at that.
Oh, here, right?
Weird.
So I'm gonna say no to that.
Does it look like that
We're not
on
doing
Zoom
that.
or is it just our?
We're not doing that. What do we need to see right now?
Oh, stop sharing. Veronica, can you turn off? Oh, she doesn't have her share screen on. Okay.
Hit share screen here.
Yeah, I don't have my share screen.
See, it's trying to share. It's going back. It's sharing itself is what it's doing.
What if you share the
Try
PowerPoint?
sharing. Try sharing now.
Yeah, press share. Just, okay.
What if you share just the PowerPoint and not the screen?
There we go. Now try stopping share.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Ah.
So we don't need to see Veronica, correct?
Right.
We just need to be able to hear her. So I
I
don't,
don't know what people at home can see.
at home,
The light show.
Dance party. We don't need to be, this computer doesn't need to be in Zoom though, because Veronica
Oh,
is, so I'm just gonna end this. And if that ruins it, that's on me. But we should still be able to, you can get to the slides if you need to. And
Did
then
we
should
just
be
end
able-
the Zoom for everybody?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
that I'm-
Oh,
Should be
okay.
okay. Thank you for.
Good.
Break.
Cool.
Jamie really wanted to talk about the sites. That maybe had some great ideas there. So, so we don't need to, no, there's no obligation to build. It's just
In
that we
the
have to
by the
plan.
third.
for the
Now, but it's a requirement of the state, right? And so we have until 2031 to what essentially?
Essentially make sure that our zoning map and our zoning ordinance can allow for those sites to be developed.
Okay, and then it's up to planning commission and council to approve the projects as they come in, following all the new laws and things that have passed over
Correct.
the time. And okay, I just wanted to offer that information to
Yeah.
offer some perspective. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
I have some questions about the outreach.
Mhm.
So you said there was emails sent out and these flyers. I'm curious, how many people were the emails sent out to?
So I sent emails to everyone on our like boards and commissions and we've been on our website, we've had a link that if you're interested, please email, they'd send emails to me. So I've been creating a list
Okay,
and,
hundreds, maybe a couple.
yeah, 100 at least
Okay.
went out, but
And what about these flyers? Where are they being posted and how many?
there's about maybe 75 at the library. Nikki has some at the rec center and then we have them upstairs.
Are you using social media to promote this as well?
Yes, and I think Chloe will be helping me with the social media piece of that.
And in that same vein, you said there were stakeholder interviews in November. I'm curious who the stakeholders were, how
Oh,
many
so-
people, where you found them.
Yeah, there were, I want to say 7 stakeholder groups. One was large employers, others, large business owners, so large employers would be like the schools, school system, school district was there. County, yeah, I mean, the school district's more countywide, but it really has a focus of, we had the SoCal Elementary School District present because they're within Capitola for New Brighton Middle School. So we also had a local resident group. We had a housing like activist group. We had a nonprofits who are focused on housing group. We had an internal staff group because RRM had a lot of questions for us, and we really looked at like what hurdles exist in Capitola and what they think needs to be addressed in this next housing element within that group, those groups. So
Yeah.
we had a design group, like architects.
I wanted to ask too, do you have like demographics or any sort of information about people who are submitting the survey or taking part in these groups? Like, I'm just curious, like how many, age, gender, income, renters versus owners, because I think it would be really important to ensure that we're getting, a fair representation of the residents when we're taking that as, community input.
Yes, I believe at the beginning of the survey, it asks whether or not you're a resident or an employee in Capitola, or what your relationship is, and even if you're a visitor, just visit Capitola. I'm not sure if we have, and I think it does ask rent or own, so we get into the housing dynamic if they do live here. And then also, but I'm not sure about the age.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the numbers. It was interesting that Scotts Valley had a lower number than Capitola. And I find that interesting because Scotts Valley is a lot more land, and when we have a lot less land. And it simply said that if we meet the mandate, we don't have to see it through or the projects through. That's going to depend upon the developers. I want to put that out there.
Yeah, so Capitola is an area, we have a really high number when the HCD is assigning or in their guidance, and really it comes down to the AMBAG meetings at the regional AMBAG meetings. That's where we look at the formula for how the units will be distributed. And in that formula, there's new items that we need to look at. And because it would seem practical that you would look at land area and understand how land area impacts future housing. And we've got, I think when I first got here, we said we had 12 vacant lots, and now I think it's less than 6. So, we're land, we don't have much opportunity in terms of vacant land. But the state, when they're assigning these numbers, they really believe that more density belongs in areas that already have density. So your cities should get more dense. And so that's why you're seeing our number go up. And then also we've got a lot of I'm trying to think of the term they use at the HCD, but we have a lot of benefits to our residents here. We've got great schools, we've got parks, we've got a great, wonderful library, a lot of benefits to the community. That's another item that when they're doing the analysis is they put more units in areas in which like people that need housing can flourish and be in a great school system and have access to a wonderful library. And so those are some parts of it. And then also the racial makeup of Capitola. It's not as diverse. So that's another thing that's looked at, is to create more opportunities under fair housing. And so really, it was really interesting going through the process this year, and the laws have changed significantly since the last go around. And also the numbers that came down at the state level were much higher than the last go around. So.
I have more questions.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So the places we zoned for the last housing cycle, because those weren't developed, right? They're not all of them. A large percent of them weren't actually developed. Do places we need to zone for, plan for this housing cycle, are those completely unique from the last housing cycle, or do we include some of the ones that weren't actually developed in the last housing cycle? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Veronica, do you want to comment on the new law for?
Yeah, certainly. There's been a lot of changes in state law, and you can reuse the sites. So if you have rezoned it or identified it in the previous housing element cycle and nothing happened on it, you can reuse the sites. Now, the only problem also, it's not a problem, but you don't have a lot of choices. So, you know, if you don't want to rezone a lot of sites, reusing sites that are feasible, also subject to the by right without discretionary review if 20% of the units are affordable for lower income. So rezone past the statutory deadline was subject to that. Reusing sites that you have previously used before will be subject to that. There are also higher standards of what constitutes sites. And so some of the sites you identified in the past may not be usable because of the size. State law says a parcel or site that is less than half an acre or is larger than 10 acre are not feasible sites for lower income housing, for your low income RHNA. So some of, I imagine, I don't know enough about your sites inventory at this time, but I would imagine that some of your sites in the last cycle were small sites. So they can be reused for other income category like moderate and above moderate income. But if you're using it for low income, they need to be at least half an acre.
Thank you. I have another question. Regarding the minimum and maximum units per acre that you were discussing, and the need to apply zoning changes before the end of the year. I'm curious, because it sounded like the goal was to maintain a maximum of 20 units per acre, but it was my understanding from the slide that 20 units per acre would be the minimum number for that is financially viable for low-income housing. I was hoping to get some clarity on that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So for the rezone, which we need to do, the reason if we get the rezone done, we need to we can put in our zoning code a minimum and a maximum. But if we go through and we add a maximum density, so right now our multifamily high density is at like 19.6.
So under what's financially
So it's under
viable.
what's financially viable. So we'll probably be coming back to you and asking to bump that up to at least 20, but possibly up to 25, so that, or 30, so that people will have, it'll make sense when it gets to HCD to rezone. So if we put in new maximums and we can, under the new maximums, we say we can meet our density limits with these new maximums and rezone, then we won't be subject to the state's requirement of a minimum of 20 units per site.
And is this the 20 units per site? Is this like for
Or 20 units per acre.
Yeah, per acre. Is that for like medium density, or is it for a specific like density category?
Okay, great question. So if we assign low income housing to that site, it has to have a minimum of 20 units per acre if we have not rezoned.
And
so it doesn't matter what the zoning is. It's just if it gets
so
assigned.
it would have a minimum, but wouldn't we already be putting a minimum of 20 to 25 to 30, right?
So if we rezone before the end of the year, we won't be subject to that.
Yeah, and Katie, if I can kind of supplement that, you know, the 1,400 units that you're faced with, you could do 30 units to the acre, 35 units to the acre, and in some areas, maybe then you don't have as many, you don't have to identify that many sites, you know. But what we are trying to avoid is the bottom. When you have a zoning district, you always have a range, right? The bottom range and the upper range. So if we're able to get to the rezoning before the end of the year, your upper range has to be at least 20, like the maximum has to be, the minimum maximum has to be at least 20 units to the acres, but you can go to 35, 40, whatever you want to, but you don't have to have a bottom. Like, or you can establish the bottom at whatever you choose to. But if you can't get to your rezoning by the end of the year, the maximum density would be 20, 25 to 30 units to the acre, but the bottom has to be 20. So you're not going to, when you have a zoning district that is like 20 to 30 units to the acre, if the range is 20 to 30 units to the acre, let's say, if you get to the rezoning past the end of the year, then you cannot accept a project that comes in at 19.5 units to the acre because your bottom is 20. So you cannot have like a townhome project that comes in at 19.5 units to the acre.
Thank you.
All right. I did have a question that I may be getting ahead of us here, but would we be, as far as ADUs, would we be identifying private property that would be able to sustain ADUs and reaching out to those property owners, or is that something?
So we'll base it on trends. We'll be looking at Capitola and how our trends have been in ADUs have increased over time. And this past year, we've been seeing a lot of traction, and the council, we've put a lot of money into like the guidance documents for ADUs. And so we're hoping to see that bump up for last year's numbers. But so based on trends, we can include those within our housing element.
Thank you. And then I know you mentioned when we're reviewing sites, will be, when they're being looked at and looked into, certain problem areas will be sought. And I know that from the public standpoint, there's going to be a lot of questions about traffic and water and infrastructure, things like that. So I think, because a lot of people think about the mall and they're just wondering about how it's going to affect the 41st corridor and the residents around it. And so just taking that as an example, I guess what's something that we can put forth to the public stating that this is something that will be addressed in a development, right? So you don't just slap on a unit with all these parcels on it and just not think about how it's going to affect traffic or water or infrastructure. So I think if that's something that can be really transparent, or that, like, at least I know it's a question that I get asked a lot, like when we talk about the mall is, well, what about this? What about that? And just to have these ideas sort of churning and formulating. And again, I think I'm getting ahead of our steps because I know we're talking about rezoning, but I think that's just something that would be helpful for us to understand a little bit better too, and have the lingo and the jargon when we're moving forward in the rezoning and all that. So that's sort of more of a comment.
Well, I think, part of this is a CEQA analysis. They have another consultant they're working with that will be looking at CEQA, so your environmental review.
Okay.
So that will be included as part of this package. And also in the rezoning, there's a CEQA requirement to look at overall, like if while we're rezoning, we have to look at the impacts to our environment and built environment as well. So the streets and
okay,
connections.
Great. Were there any last council questions? Okay, we can go out to public comment. I see nobody.
We do have one speaker on Zoom.
Awesome.
I don't have a microphone, so you wouldn't mind letting JM know that they've been allowed to speak and they can present.
Great. Welcome, JM. You have been allowed to speak. You can unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, guys. I hope everyone's having a good night. I heard Veronica Tam say that 67% of our assigned AMBAG units is because we didn't build anything for 20 years. I'm wondering if I heard correctly. And I also wonder if we had representation on AMBAG during this process. Thank you.
Great. You can respond.
So the 60% increase was, and Veronica, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was for the, not just specific to Capitola, but on a statewide, and looking at our state and our region, that was not just based on Capitola. So that did not come into the formula when the units were divvied up at the AMBAG level. So just to clarify that point, that's at the state level. And the second question.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well known by the speaker and others that I'm the representative for AMBAG, and I was the AMBAG representative last year when we went through the RENA process. There's minutes for those meetings, I believe, on the AMBAG website, as well as minutes for the meetings that we had for what, 8 months that we discussed the RENA process. And I brought it up here at council that it was coming down and how it was going to work out, and fought pretty hard for the city of Capitola at the time. And here we are.
Yeah, great.
And I recollect that the city council submitted multiple letters to AMBAG. So.
Yep.
Thank you.
And can we just clarify, because the speaker, the suggestion was that because we didn't build, we had those additional percentages, but can we just clarify again that it's not our responsibility to build, it's our responsibility to be builder friendly, correct?
Yeah. I mean, just 2 points I would add to that. Number one is that it's the city's responsibility to create the zoning. I think that's what Veronica Tam, that's what housing elements do, is the city needs to create the zoning necessary to accommodate the RENA units. And in addition, we heard from our consultant this evening that they also recommend a buffer. So you want to accommodate more than just the exact 1336.
Right.
They recommend a buffer. But the other one I just want to answer very directly is there was nothing in the formula from AMBAG that had anything to do with what Capitola has done in the past. It was our demographics, and it was demographics and
our risk.
And yeah, there was just a number of factors, but nothing that looked and said, oh, Capitola, you only built 12 units in the last 10 years or 3 years or whatever. So therefore, just want to make sure it's all looking ahead and looking at our sort of intrinsic characteristics.
Right. That's why it sets us apart. So do we have anybody else online that would like to speak? Okay, well, we can go back. Do we have to make a motion, or are we just, okay.
I have a quick comment though.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Comment. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, when we were going through the AMBAG RENA process, I kind of talked here and there at council meetings about what a difficult process this was going to be when it came to us. And now here we are. I don't envy you, Katie and staff, for the work that you're going to have to do. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And if it's not, already clear, I'll just point out to our friends out in the Bay Area region are about a year ahead of us in terms of their 5th cycle RENA process. And of the 109 cities and counties in the Bay Area, only, I think it was 14 submitted their housing element on time by the January 31st deadline. So it's a really complicated and complex process, and hopefully we won't be in that same boat. But just as kind of a sign of what's ahead of us learning that statistic was pretty shocking to me and made me think that, this is going to be a really hard and complex process, but I know that we're all ready. And if we're not ready, we're about to be. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I encourage the community to take the housing survey. Again, as we move forward, as the mayor mentioned, a lot of people have concerns about traffic and infrastructure. And of course, those are valid concerns. But let us also remember that density is essentially a requirement for our future at this point, to be denser than we already are. I think for something to be considered a very high density is like 75 units an acre, 76 units an acre, something like that. And we're not even considering that. So what might be considered a high density here in Capitola is not what would be considered high density by the standards, I suppose you would call it. So let's just keep an open mind for what we are preparing our city for. And yeah, let's get it done.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was informative to me too. I think moving forward, this was a snapshot into the future. It's not these steadfast buildings are going to go up by the end of the year and we're just here for that. So thank you, Katie, for all your work. Thank you, Kristen, for all your work with AMBAG. And yeah, I look forward to seeing, hopefully we're not part of that statistic of not reaching our numbers. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And sort of a statement too, not to try to complicate the project. I know we're on a really tight deadline, but I'm just thinking, is there a way that I or other council members or other entities or groups from the city can get more involved in the process? Because we have 2 workshops planned, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how many city council meetings are discussing this topic for?
So right now, what we have planned is once we come up with the locations to possibly either do what we just did with the planning commission followed by a city council meeting, or maybe do a joint meeting. We'll be sending out emails and trying to, if we go the joint meeting, we'll have to send out emails and figure out a date that would work for all 10, which can prove difficult at times. But yeah, so that's the right here, right now. Once we get into adoption hearings, it's really up to the planning commission and city council how many hearings that will go through. But it's really important that we get a first draft off to the HCD and continue working, just so we meet that timeline. But opportunities for involvement, I can continue to keep you updated on where we're at, but you will be hearing from us again late March, early April with that first sites analysis inventory. So it's probably going to be March. So not too far out.
Okay. Yeah, great. I just want to make sure that plenty of opportunities for all stakeholders to be involved, because it is a quick process that will, greatly impact Capitola for the next 8 years.
And I suspect that once we do have that map put together, the room will be.
Yeah, I'm surprised there isn't more engagement tonight.
Yeah.
We usually make those meetings with this as the only item on the agenda, right? Like when we have our big zoning meetings, that's usually the only item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rubber will hit the road. We'll start talking about sites.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll educate the public along the way that this is zoning, it's not building. So there's the fear out there now is, oh my God, they're gonna put 12 stories on 41st Avenue tomorrow.
Is that all you need from us? We received. We received the citywide housing element, item 7C.
Oh my goodness.
We did. I'll let you know. We did. Yes.
General consensus.
Yes. That's a voice vote. Yeah. Okay. So cool. That thank you, everybody. It brings us to item 8, which is adjournment. Appreciate y'all. Have a lovely evening.